look at that skyscraper.
I know.
Right.
Are you ready?
In this video, we'll be reviewing the Nikon Z 70-200 2.8. We already know it's a beautiful lens.
Beautiful.
We're just going to compare it to my 85 1.8.
And this 24-200, which is f4 to f6.3, great walk around lens, half the size, half the weight, but obviously hasn't got that 2.8 goodness of this beauty. Now, if you've got one of these, do you really need one of those?
Well, that's it. If we use the 70-200 at 85, or even at the 200 focal length, the depth of field and the bokeh should be just as good.
Does this replace all of your primes within that range?
This is to admire that lens, the quality throughout the range, not just the depth of field. The image quality seems way above everything else.
It's beautiful, it really is.
Okay, let's jump straight in to the sharpness test. So they are shot at the same settings, 70-200, 24-200, all the same settings. They're at 100%. You'd be hard-fetched to see any difference at 100%. Let's have a look at the side. Again, no, I don't think there was any difference there. Let's jump into 200%. And this is where you start to see the difference. So you can see that the 70-200 is a lot sharper at 200%. But again, not much in it, and we have cropped in 200% here. So if that's not important to you, then there's no real difference. Okay, so now I have the 70-200 at 2.8 compared to the 6.3 of the 24-200. So again, at 200 they look the same. Let's crop in at 100% to see any difference. And again, at 2.8, the sharpness is the same at 100%. I'm struggling to see any differences there at all, even in the depth of field, because it's quite far away, it looks identical to me. This is now cropped in at 250%. And as you can see, even at 2.8, it's still maybe even sharper than the 24-200 at 6.3. I would definitely say so on that. The sharpness is sharper. Now I'm going to compare the same 70-200 but at 2.8 compared to 6.3, just to show that there isn't much difference in sharpness when you shoot at different apertures with this. So obviously we're shooting 2.8 to 6.3. The difference isn't that great, I don't think, which shows how great shooting at 2.8 is. Obviously you want it for the shallow depth of field, but you can comfortably shoot at 2.8 to let the light in, and it's still really sharp. So let's try this lens as a portrait lens compared to the 85. The 85 is a 1.8. The main difference is the depth of field, obviously, and it's a lot better bokeh. But the 70-200 is still nice bokeh. It's still nice and blurry, but obviously it doesn't have the creamy 1.8 of the 85, in my opinion. So let's look at the sharpness at 100%, unfortunately on my face. And there's no difference. They're both really sharp. Of course, the 1.8 does drift off quicker because of the depth of field, but on portraits you want that. So this is 150% crop on my face, unfortunately. But the sharpness is the same on the eyes, I would say. And there is a nice depth of field there as well. Both my ears are out of focus, but of course 1.8 is that noticeably one step shallower, which you want with portraits most of the time. So let's compare the 85 at 2.8, so it shoots at the same depth of field. So at 85, they look pretty much identical. There is a slight creaminess to the 85, I would say, in the depth of field in the background, in the bokeh. Not much in it, yeah, they look identical. And this is at 150%, they look identical. They both have the eyes in focus, the ears slightly out of focus, and the background fully out of focus. And that's what you want. I'm going to compare the 85 with the 70-200 at their best. So I've got the 85 at 1.8 and at 200, 2.8 on the other lens to really see which lens is better for portraits. They both look good. So I would say at 200 it gives the depth of field a better advantage because it's more compressed. As you can see, the lines here are much more wider, and here you can see a lot more, obviously, because you're a lot closer shooting with the 85. They both look good, but does the 200 give more isolated look, compressed look, compared to the 85? So let's look at a sharpness test. This is at 150%. Both eyes are in focus, look good, and there's a great depth of field lost there because my ears are out of focus. So yeah, nice creamy depth of field bokeh there, and nice and sharp focus on the face and the eyes. So this is now comparing the 24-200 lens at its lowest aperture of 6.3 versus the 70-200 at 2.8. So obviously, shooting at 6.3, you'll have a lot more things in focus. So obviously the background bokeh is a lot different because it'll be a lot more in focus. But if shooting at 200 with a 6.3 isn't that bad. I mean, it's out of focus. It has isolated the subject, but obviously you're losing the lovely creamy bokeh shooting at a low aperture. The 24-200 at 6.3 will have a lot more things in focus. So obviously my ear is more or less in focus there. And as you can see, the rest of me is in focus too, whereas shooting at low apertures, you won't. It's rare that you want everything in focus for a portrait. So now this is shooting with a DX lens. On a Z6, it's about 375mm. So it was interesting to see the depth of field that it would create when you can shoot at such a long length. And obviously it's the same as the 24-200. Everything's been focused a bit more. It's still isolated the subject, but you lose that portrait quality. This is a lower light test now. So we're comparing the 70-200 at 2.8 and the 24-200. Obviously the lowest f-stop at 70 is 6. I boosted the shadows in both pictures the same to make an example of how it deals with the shadows, bringing out the shadows to make a picture. So you can see on the 24-200 it's a lot grainier even at. So at 100% crop, the 70-200 is obviously a much better photo because it shoots at 2.8, which means the ISO is a lot lower. As you can see on the 24-200, it has to shoot at f6 and it's 51,000 ISO and it's grainy. Very noisy there. And shooting at 200 with the 24-200, you can see that the picture is unusable, whereas on this 2.8, it's obviously a very usable image. This is comparing the 70-200 against the 85. So the 85 is at 1.8, so it should let more light in, allowing a lower ISO. But from these comparisons, they both look the same, not much in it, slightly different colour tones. So at 100%, the 70-200 does show signs of noise. It is at 18,000 ISO, whereas the 85mm is at 7,200. So yeah, it does show that the 85 is a crisper image and it can bring out the shadows more. So at 200% you can see the noise a lot more clearly in the 70-200. But again, the Z6 is so good at low light performance, you could always lower the shadows and use noise reduction and you might have a usable image there.
Four, have we? No,
No.
let's start again, that's gibberish. So,
Gibberish.
in summary, the daytime comparisons were pretty close at 100%. It wasn't until you got to 200% that you could really see a difference with the 70-200, 2.8.
Yeah, compared with the 24-200.
Yeah, but the 24-200 was really good.
So it's a great walk-around lens. I must admit, I love this lens, and when it's on the camera, I really just want to keep it at 2.8 all the time because it's just beautiful shallow depth of field and a lovely look to it. And as you said, really, really sharp even at 2.8.
Using this lens as a portrait lens is an interesting one because it's more about aesthetics than actually the technical ability of it. So comparing it to the 85, if you stand at different separations apart, you can get a very similar look. The sharpness, as we proved, is the same.
Yeah.
Even beyond 100%, the sharpness is the same. So it's all about the depth of field. So with the 85, obviously you've got a 1.8. Now that extra step does give you, in my opinion, that creamier bokeh.
Yeah, it was noticeable, I think, compared to the 2.8 on this, although this was still giving a lovely, sharp, nice image. But then, as you say, you can put this, say, on 200mm, stand further back, and you're getting a different look again, which is quite nice.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing, that the compression of the background and of the actual subject was different. Because you're shooting at 200, it's obviously going to be the different dimensions of how it shapes the image.
Yeah.
Of course, when you're taking portraits, you had to be about 2 or 3 times further away, shooting at 200. And with shooting portraits, it's not always ideal.
It's quite tricky as well when there's a canal behind you.
You don't want to fall in. But that's the thing, when I'm shooting portraits, I like to be not too close, but a nice distance to be able to direct and have that kind of personal intimacy with the subject.
Yeah.
To be able to direct them, to make them feel comfortable. If I'm too far away, it's not practical.
With this, I think you've got the quality of having almost several primes in your bag. From going from the 70 to 200, you've got the 85mm, you've got the 135, and then you obviously at the really long end, you've got 200mm. I think there's an argument saying this is really good value for money. Yes, it's an expensive lens.
Well, that's the argument, isn't it? You've got 2.8 across the range, giving you so much flexibility.
Yeah.
And if you've got a 24 to 70 2.8, and the wider ones above that, all 2.8,
Yeah.
you've got the whole range at 2.8, which is gorgeous.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the night time, the low light photography. Obviously, the lower f-stop, the better quality you're going to get. But in Lightroom, you can reduce the noise and deepen the shadows darker, and you could probably end up with the same image overall. So again, the 2.8 is a massive difference there compared to the 24 to 200, which was struggling.
Yeah, struggling a lot. Obviously, I mean, it was 51,200 maximum ISO really, so loads of noise in the shadows as soon as you touch them. But then, you know, what do you expect really? We knew that was going to be the result, didn't we?
It's true. I mean, the 24 to 200 is a great carry around, walk around lens for a lot of situations,
Yeah.
but not low light.
No.
I would not lose it for low light, but that's what you're paying for with this. This is the
Yeah.
quality of this 2.8. It is heavy and it is quite big. So obviously you can't use it if you want to be discreet. And even for portraits, I think having a lens that big, with shooting people that aren't so used to the camera, that would be
Yeah.
quite intimidating.
It is a little bit more intimidating.
We found the autofocus speed really fast with the Z lenses and the new bodies, especially with the update.
Yeah.
And it seems really fast with this lens, in your opinion, do you think?
Yeah, no, it's really good. I mean, that was one thing. Late at night, it was focusing a lot faster than 24 to 200 because it's letting more light in, I guess. So all to be expected.
The 24
really.
to 200 was?
This was
You just
focusing
said,
faster
you just
than
said the 24 to 200 is faster.
No, I didn't.
You
I'll say it
did.
again then. Okay.
I'm going to play that back to you later.
Yeah, you do.
Well, when you first got this lens, we compared it to our older F lenses. We had the 70 to 200 f4, which we both loved in the past.
Yeah.
We considered it one of the best favourite lenses to use. But since with the Z systems and comparing it to this, we were quite surprised, weren't we?
Yeah, this really blew it away, didn't it, effectively?
The sharpness comparison was miles away.
I think the only advantage really of the primes, obviously, is you've got the extra stop of shallow depth of field, and they're smaller and lighter and cheaper, really, obviously, compared to
Well, that's
this.
the thing. I mean, that's 2,500, let's say.
Yeah,
You could get the 24 to 200, the 85, and another prime, a 50mm 1.8.
no. Well, if you get the 24 to 200 and an 85,
Yeah.
that's still not much more than
Yeah.
half the price of this.
So the real debate is the 24 to 200 in daytime, it's the same sharpness but different depth of field. But obviously you're getting the 2.8 across the range, which is worth the price in itself, I think. So we'll have a video coming up testing the 1.4 and the 70 to 200 because we've found so far some interesting results
We have,
which may
yeah.
surprise you.
Yeah. So thanks for watching if you've got this far with all of our comparisons. Really help us if you could like the video if you enjoyed it, but also please drop a comment on there and let us know your thoughts.
If you've used the lens and you found it particularly useful in a certain way we haven't mentioned today, and the price comparison, what would you prefer to have?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Good evening.